You're listening to the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast, where we discuss whatever the fuck we want to. And yes, we can put sex and drugs and Jesus all in the same bed and still be all right at the end of the day. My name is Devanin, and I'll be interviewing guests from every corner of this world as we dig into topics that are too risque for the morning show, as we strive to help you understand what's really going on in your life. There is nothing off the table, and we've got a lot to talk about, so let's dive right into this episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast. I'm super excited to have you back with me today, and I appreciate it very much. Today we have on our show for the second time, Mr. Jerry Fu. He is our favorite salsa dancer and leadership coach, and he is back to spill some major church tea with us today. Now, this guy's got some major education and experience under his belt, but I feel like his life experience is his best qualification, and that's why I wanted to talk to this man again. Jerry used to be a volunteer leader at a large church in Houston, Texas, so he's going to be spilling all the heterosexual drama from within this church, and I wanted to highlight this because churches always want to talk about the gays and everything like that. They don't want to talk about the shit that straight people do. And so we're spilling all the church tea today. We're going to talk about xenophobia in Houston, Texas. And Jerry was also going to bless us with a funny masturbation story, which is just like, yeah, you just need to hear it. Enjoy the show. Today we have the amazing, the incredible, the wonderful, the insightful, the intuitive, the shrewd, the wise, the quite detailed and uber focused Jerry Fu, back with us today for the second damn time. Jerry, how the fuck are you?
Man, January is just racing, but I'm good.
Right? It's like we're recording this on the 14th, so basically the month's halfway over. It seems like I was just sipping champagne on New Year's, not too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know. It's like I did everything I could just to stay calm and just stay in and reflect. And I'm gonna do my best to savor this, but here we go.
You hit the nail on the head. The word "stay in" with Miss Omicron out there. I done canceled all my travel and shit. Stay in is what's happening. We ain't going no damn where. We'll see where we're at about June and go from there. I know so many fucking people with it, and they're vaccinated and boosted and everything. But this Omicron, I think it just gets high off the vaccine.
Yeah. It's like you're bad. It turns out that was the weapon the entire time. They plant this in you and then they trigger it and you're like, oh, I thought I was protecting myself. Turns out I starved myself in my own bunker, right?
So since we're going to be inside, we might as well create another great podcast for people to feast on.
Absolutely.
Now, we know Jerry has the incredible website at daftingleaders.com. All of his information will go in the show notes, again, along with his bio and everything like that. Jerry, is there anything you'd like the people to know about you or to hear from you today?
Sure. I am grateful to have the opportunity to, tell people my story and, hopefully that career arc is something that will inspire and encourage people and, just ultimately help transform people, whether they enlist my help directly or not. But I'm also thankful for moments like this where I can kind of pull back the curtain a little more and really unpack some of the crazier things that I just barely get a chance to touch on in other podcasts because, you have like the general zoom out overview, right? And then you have to find that balance of, well, here, let me show a little more, what's behind the scenes, but not come across as like subtweeting or like really bitter or scarred. So trying to find that balance here, but willing to roll the dice, right? Because if we just wanted another boring, bland podcast, sure, like why would people tune in? So, happy to give you guys some more substance and some examples to really study and sink your teeth into to say, hey, how did this happen? What can we take away from it? And how do we make sure that other people don't have to deal with this?
Look, I don't mind if you come across as bitter and scarred. You know what? We're human. Sometimes a bitch is gonna get bitter. And sometimes we might feel scarred. You know what?
Fair enough.
If the shit happens, the shit happens. And
it's true. I cannot do it.
If I try to judge you, they can go fuck themselves.
That's fair.
But Jerry's, he coaches people and he helps them to adopt, especially as leaders and things like that, tools he gives people are effective both in and out of the workplace. But the real shit that we're about to talk about today is why I feel Jerry is super passionate and unique about what he does, because he's able to infuse this real life experiences into his profession. And there's the difference in between a real motherfucker who's lived through some bullshit and is now helping people as opposed to somebody who just went to school for it. Jerry went to
Mm,
school for it and he lived it. And so when you put those two together, you absolutely cannot lose.
yeah,
So
yeah.
in our last interview, we touched on this just a tad, but I found it so titillating that I just had to get him this man back on this show so I can get all the tea and the details. And we may get a little bit shady today to y'all. So I'm gonna tell you, as Mama Rue would say, the library is open and reading is fundamental.
There we go.
So Jerry used to work. Okay, so you were you working at this church or were you volunteering? What exactly?
It was a strictly volunteer position.
Okay.
So on that arc, I joined this class, and then, as my time there got longer, they said, hey, we need some help with leadership, and can you help step in as a prayer coordinator? And I said, yeah, sure, I can step in like that. And then after that, they said, well, now can you help out with like social events and come up to the core level of leadership? And I said, okay, yeah, sure. Let's talk about what's going on there. Eventually it got to a point where people asked me, hey, would you please be director of our class? No one else is capable or willing. And we need your help now. I struggled with that decision for a while, because I knew what kind of challenges directors would deal with on a continual basis. And the turnover rate's not great. And but I was at a point where I said, well, I'm grateful for the community that this class has offered me the last couple of years. I am in the process of continuing to take on leadership challenges. So this will be my challenge for this year. We'll try to serve a year as a church class director, and we'll see how it goes. So yeah, that's how I got to that point. But it was all entirely volunteer. I was never on payroll at the church.
Well, and I was just curious that's kind of a moot point in the sense that churches really can't make it without volunteers. They use a lot of
Sure.
labor. And
Mhm.
so, just like with, I guess, all nonprofits, volunteers and staff members work in tandem. Volunteers are given an incredible amount of access because if nonprofits just relied on the staff alone, they would go broke.
Sure. Yeah.
Because especially in churches, 'cause, they don't pay taxes, but they've got all of those, chicken platters to get and, all the other bullshit they like to spend money on. And, they have their priorities and things like that. And, in
Mhm.
some churches, they got $1 million aircrafts and golden toilets and shit and all of that,
It's true.
needs. Now, are you able to tell me which church this was and what city it was in?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm
Not that
happy to tell people where I am.
Yo,
So
not that that matters because the same bullshit happens at churches globally. But
yeah, fair enough.
sometimes 'cause it's more about what happened more than where it happened, but I'm a nosy
Mhm.
bitch, and so I'm asking everything today. So,
No, it's here. Yeah, it's here. I can say this much because of this. It tells you something, but not tells you anything. It's a Baptist church here in Houston, so that's all you need to know.
it was
Right.
probably First Baptist. I just know it. I just feel like it's First Baptist.
Can't. I'm not. I won't. I won't. I won't. I can't deny or refute
To
anything. So here we go.
confirm or deny these allegations.
Yeah.
And so what was the congregation size?
Oh, it's easily a couple thousand. I mean, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
No, I'd say you are probably right, if not exactly right. So
So
we'll leave it at that.
So so then due to the size of the church, so that means the class sizes and everything like that was rather significant too. So we're not talking about like a class of 3 or 4 people.
Oh, yeah. No, they're like you could have a class of 40, 50 people easily. There were classes even in the hundreds, just because, yeah, they have a very effective, marketing funnel, and they have, all the best events for single people, whether it was a New Year's Eve party at Minute Maid Park or, you know, yeah, energy, even, I mean, they had a lot of resources and deep pockets for sure. And so,
Okay.
yeah, we rode that wave.
And so the Baptist people don't mind drinking. So they had a Christmas Eve party at Minute Maid Park. Was there a refreshing adult libations?
No, they are very, very clear on that bylaw. Like, hey, like, I mean, like, pay people if you're on payroll at the church, you're not allowed to drink. Like, you have to sign a contract that's in your contract that you are not allowed to drink alcohol at all. Anything associated with the church cannot have alcohol. And so, yeah, there is there are some funny Facebook groups about, like, off-campus Baptist behavior, and we can unpack that later. But the church is very good from a liability standpoint of making sure there's no alcohol at any of their events.
Wait, so they told you you cannot drink alcohol at your private house or anywhere else just because you were volunteering for them?
No, well, volunteers, like, it's, that's that if you're on payroll, like, if you are employed by the church, you're not allowed to. I mean, if you're a church members, it's the classic, like, honor system. It's like, okay, on this campus, you are not allowed to. These are forbidden. What you do in your own house, like, yeah, like, you show discretion, right?
I
It's
still
just that kind of thing.
I still think that that is far too damn far for them to reach. Even if
Hmm.
somebody's on staff, you
Hmm.
don't own a person. You
Fair enough.
you cannot tell tell me what to do when I'm in my damn house from scratching my nutsack. If I want to take a shot of Jack Daniel, as long as when I show up to work, my dick is in my pants where it belongs and I don't smell like fucking hooch.
It's fair.
What
Yeah.
I did last night ain't your motherfucking business. So why do you think churches are so goddamn meddlesome and nosy?
Well, it's just there's an image to protect, right? There's a brand. And, I look at churches like in other countries like Uganda or, Myanmar or China, right? And it's like they're so caught up doing like the real work of the gospel, they don't have time to like argue over like what the song list for Sunday should be, or like, did someone proofread the PowerPoint slides or, other things like that. If the church is simply just a tax exempt country club, right? Like, this is basically what it feels like. But yeah, I think it's just a brand to protect them. They're just like, we need people and their tithe money to keep our thing going. And so if we leverage the promises of like happiness and fulfillment by being a part of our church, then this is how the machine goes, right? We're like, hey, air conditioning is expensive in Texas. Like, we gotta pay the bills. We gotta pay for our professional musicians. We want to, advertise, at soccer games and professional sports events to continue to draw people into our church. So yeah.
We had to pay for our $1 million aircraft and limousine rides and state dinners and everything like that. All the things Jesus would have wanted us to have on
Yeah,
the church's dime.
yeah, absolutely.
So they see you clean cut gentlemen, professional looking. Now, this is a
Mhm.
huge church, and churches we know are run like businesses. They have a business model, like what Jerry was just saying. They have marketing goals. They have a bottom line. They need to rake in that dough. So they see you and they're like, you look like the kind of guy we need. That's
Mhm.
exactly where I think they were coming from because they got their types, they profile people and everything like that. And so they see that they can use you, that they can utilize you, and I just say that evenly after I got fired from the church and, years later, I realized just how transactional the relationship was, even though I was volunteering, it's very much about what can we get out of these volunteers,
Mhm.
and the staff thinks in terms of how can they get volunteers to work them out of a job, so to speak. And so there's a lot of objectivity in the way
Mhm.
church members view the volunteers. I
Mhm.
mean, church staff view volunteers.
Mhm.
So So are you Baptist? Like, why were you at a Baptist church to begin with?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the first question. I mean, to dovetail quickly on what you just said, right? There's this balance between, you know, people investing in the church that they go to, right? As a family, if it's like public style and not like restaurant style, right? Everyone should, if you're going to be part of the family, bring something to the table, right? On the other hand, you don't want to squeeze this to the point where people just like, oh, I'm just a consumer, and like my only job at church is to like just show up, and listen to a sermon, say some hallelujahs and then go home, right? That's just entertainment, right? But no, so I started going to a Baptist church when I first became a Christian. The woman who moved to Tennessee and began, witnessing to me, to use Christian terms, right? to become a Christian. She went to the big Baptist church that was local in my neighborhood. And so when I became a Christian halfway through high school, I started going there. And so it was just kind of like by default. So it was like, well, this is the big church. Everyone's going there. So it's like this kind of peer pressure almost. You're just like, well, this is like the Walmart, everyone shops there. So let's go. And so I didn't realize, everything about the Baptist church, when it started going. When I became a Christian, it just happened to be the biggest and most proximate option in my neighborhood.
So you say this woman was witnessing you?
Yeah, Karen, yeah, she moved from Pittsburgh to Knoxville in eighth grade. And yeah, very pretty girl, very flirtatious,
I was just,
skirted the dress code, like literally. Yeah. Like,
that's what I was about to ask you. Were you fucking her?
no, no, it was a weird paradox to Vannon because she liked to dress up and she wore makeup very well. And, you know, like I remember one dress was like barely like,
Covering her
beyond fingertips.
quarter.
But she, despite all the Florida, she made sure she would tell me, she's like, Jerry, like purity, like the only man who will have my virginity is the man I marry. And she stuck to it. She never slept around. She was very, very set on that rule, even though she would wear outfits that, any guy with hormones would just be like, it's like, Karen, come on, that's not fair. Like you can't, don't tell me to be pure when you all, dress up all pretty and flirt with us and then just, and trigger all these hormones. And it's like, okay, but now to her credit, she had integrity.
You don't know that. You don't know what the fuck that bitch was doing when she wasn't around you. Unless the Lord showed you in a vision of that. We don't know what people are doing. We don't know that.
Fair enough.
She could have been saying hollering purity on one hand and throwing that pussy from the free throw line on the other, but just not to y'all at church. We don't know.
Maybe. I mean,
You
yeah,
hope for the best in people, and I admire that about you, Jared. But I see the reality of shitting people, and I don't give people credit unless they fucking have earned it. She
fair enough.
said, girl, you a hoe unless I think otherwise. And I respect you for being a hoe, so just be about it. Shit. I got a couple of homies. Hell, they number shit. It's that. So
Yep.
now you going through all of these roles and everything like that.
Yeah.
Tell me, what was the most intense story that you can remember of somebody who you had to discipline?
Oh, yeah. Easy. Well, it happened 2 days on my second day on the job officially. Like it's really crazy. So there is a guy who is apparently a physics professor at a community college here in Houston, and he started showing up to our class. And I got to the guy, we'll call him Nick. All right. And so Nick shows up and, we get to know, obviously he's like a nice enough guy. It's like, and there's not a strong nucleus of guys in the class, which apparently we need to have it just to have a strong sense of leadership, I guess. But anyway, so I'm trying to recruit, anytime a guy shows up, we try to, play it up and see if they're willing to get more involved. And my second day as director, after getting to know Nick for a couple of weeks, one of my women leadership comes to me and says, hey, Jerry, Nick is sexually harassing women in the class. Like, you need to go deal with it. And I'm like, frick, you didn't give me a manual. It's just go run toward the gunfire, follow this grenade. You're director now. You got to handle it. It's like, oh, me growing up all conflict averse. I'm like, I don't want to deal with this challenge, and then, so yeah. And plus I was about to go on vacation, no less like this. I had this vacation plans, and so I couldn't even call this guy up and sit down face to face with him. I had to do this, over the phone and pray that he just wouldn't hang up on me. Right. So I call him up and I'm like, hey, Nick, something came up. I just wanted to run this by you. So, woman in the class is telling me you're sexually harassing. What's going on? And then, he's like, I don't know what they're talking about. I don't know what they're talking about. Da. Like, and I'm just thinking, okay, this isn't productive. And so, I was still refining my conflict resolution approach, right? So this is just me thinking on my feet in the moment. And I decided to somehow position myself as a guide of sorts. And I'm like, okay, Nick, well, as far as I could tell, there's 3 possibilities, right? From what evidence has been presented to me. Number 1, you're right and they're wrong. Like somehow your innocence is true and they're just fabricating things, which means this is probably a misunderstanding of some kind, right? And so if this is true, then I need you to go talk to them, figure out exactly what things you're doing unaware that, you were causing them problems or antagonizing them, you know, apologize. And then just, that's it, right? Everything's back to normal. It's like, oh, you know, don't need me running around the pool with my shorts on and no shirt. Okay, sorry. In mixed company and Baptist, right? Baptist, you don't want to do that at Baptist churches. It's like, okay, don't. So just stop. Okay, you didn't know any better. Now you know. Please stop. That's it. Right. Possibility number two: they are right and you are lying, which means you're doing something offensive and inappropriate. If you expect to stay part of this class, I need you to go talk to them, apologize, and make sure that doesn't happen again. Right, and then we will be watching you closely. Right. Or three, they are insisting they're right and you insist that you're right, which means now it's their word against yours. And I have to ask you to leave because I've known them longer than I've known you. Right. I'll call her Emily. So Emily came to me with this information. I'm just like, look, I've known Emily for several years now, and she has no reason to lie to me about something like this. Right. So, what do you want to do? Like, what is your next action? He goes, oh, I guess I better go sort things out with them. I'm just like, okay, I wasn't privy to the situation. I have no personal stake in this. All I know is I'm in a position where I have to address it. So, let me know how it goes. And then Emily came to me later and she's like, yeah, Nick came to me and, said, I guess I have to apologize. And then basically didn't, but then still kept like touching my arm inappropriately. And so I just told him, I was just like, okay, you got to leave. And if you show up again, I'm going to tell Jerry and, we're going to have to, have words. He never showed up again. And so, yeah, it was just, yeah, I was already exhausted, 2 days on the job and I'm already having to deal with this.
What did he do to her besides touch her arm? Like, what was the complaint?
Well, the stuff like he was just saying offensive things. Like at one point he was around for 4th of July, like a 4th of July party. And so we were all trying to carpool and stuff. And then at one point, one of the cars was crowded and he was telling one of the girls, he's just like, you can sit on my lap. It's just like, like, not appropriate for a Baptist setting. Right. Like, apparently he was making fun of like one of the women because he found out like some of her teeth were like fakes or whatever else like that. So he was just like throwing shade and, just like he was just making use. I don't know if he was just trying to develop some kind of rapport or if he thought he was like busting on women. He thought what he did was flirting or what, but it's like, dude, what kind of movies have you been watching, man? Like there's like, I don't know why you think women like being talked to like that. So yeah.
So it sounds like it was a lot of, I would say maybe like awkward energy.
Mhm.
And I guess it happened enough. So she didn't come hollering to you at the first sign of trouble. So this was like something that built up over time. I'm trying to
A
make
little.
I'm trying to make sure she wasn't being a Karen.
Yeah, no. I mean, there's other things about this girl who I knew we can talk about fun stories on that side too. But for this kind of thing, it's more of like, yeah, you have the benefit of the doubt. Like one incident, we're like, okay, maybe that's just an outlier. Maybe there's just something there we missed. We're gonna let it go. But then, twice as a habit, right? And then it's like, okay, now there's definitely a pattern here, and we need to make sure we address this before it gets any worse. So yeah, it was, Emily, she's a funny case because like at one point we were at a church retreat. This is just a side story. At one point we were at a church retreat and she ended up getting fleas or whatever. And like she just had this like emotional meltdown about just how things are unfair and how dare they and like, her suede shoes might be infested with fleas and like it would just completely like violate her lease and she might get it was just like all this worst case scenario just was I think going through her head and I'm just thinking, yeah, I don't need this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she sounds very Karen-y to me,
Yeah.
like being real extra. And so I was wondering if she was being a little alarmist with running to you. I mean, if somebody like touches your arm, now
Mhm.
if he did other stuff to other people and maybe he was just giving weird vibes, then sure
Mhm.
you okay, yeah, maybe, but just for it,
Yeah. But that was like, but no, it wasn't just like touching. It was like repeated touching and like caressing and playing with her arm and stuff like that. And it's like, It's like, dude, she has a boyfriend, and I don't know why you think she likes you. So no, like
Okay,
you
so
don't have access to that. Yeah,
taken. Okay, so
yeah,
yeah, okay.
yeah,
He's already taken and he knows that and he's flirting. I can see that. I can see
yeah,
that.
yeah.
But I'm all for the Me Too movement and everything like that, but I don't.
Mhm.
But also, guys have a voice too. So I was just playing devil's advocate.
No, no, that's fair. I mean, like, I mean, there's this really weird like pendulum swinging the other way, right? Where it's like guys ask girls out, maybe it's clumsy, and then pretty much they just get locked down, right? They're just like, oh, how dare you, don't do that again. And then all these guys are like, oh, sorry, and then they just kind of stay on the sideline because they're just afraid to get rejected or they're afraid to get criticism. And then all these women are like, why am I 40 and still single? It's because you already shamed all the guys from asking you out, right? It wasn't, hey, thank you for the courage, to ask me out. I'm flattered. I'm not interested. And, here's some things that you could do differently to maybe increase your chance of success. Keep trying, keep going, right? Like, you don't hear that in a church setting, right? Like they assume worst case scenario and and don't get me wrong, there's plenty of predators you have to suss out, but it's just sometimes, the net doesn't catch everything correctly, right? Sometimes you set off the wrong tripwires and you're just labeled as like a predator or a creeper when really people are just needing a little more practice.
What I hear you saying, Jerry, is because these women were bitches. They had a negative ass attitude about being approached by men, since
Mhm.
that's what they sent out. That's what they received back.
That's fair.
It makes sense. One of my glasses I got from a bar in here says, "Karma's
Mhm.
only a bitch if you are."
Oh,
Oh.
that's no wonder you bought it, man. That's worth keeping around.
Go ahead and buy it. They do when you get there's a certain tap bar here that you go and you get like dollar beers or whatever. You just get to keep fucking glasses on certain nights. So I guess in a way I
Nice.
did buy it. But yeah, I want to dwell on that for a second because women, even from back in my days when I was trying to make myself be straight because the church told me that I was going to hell for not being straight, and I
Mhm.
would like try to flirt with girls and everything. I was met with a lot of fucking attitude, a lot of indifference, never anything like what you was just saying, like, thankfulness and stuff like that. It reminds me of how straight guys can be when they get around gay guys and they just think every gay guy wants to fuck them, for whatever fucking arbitrary reason. A lot
Mhm.
of women have this attitude like, oh my God, every man wants to just bother me. And oh my God, why is he talking to me? And
Mhm.
straight guys do the same fucking shit. So why do you think that is? Is this like pride, arrogance, fear? You know, why do some straight men feel so like icky about being around gay guys? How some women can get that same indifference towards a straight man if he tries to talk to her?
I think it's just a lack of knowledge, like, and just an unwillingness to be curious and humble and learn something, right? Like, when I'll use this other question just to kind of illustrate, I think, just some of the discrepancies in thinking in the church, because in pharmacy school, one of my classmates is gay, and you would continually complain about the Christians he considered fundamentalists, like that were in our class, and it's like, who is the expert on sex? And it's like Christians, because God created sex and we studied the Bible, so therefore we're the experts on sex. Who is the expert on homosexuality? Homosexuals? No, Christians, right? Because like the Bible is true and what Paul says about homosexual offenders is true, then therefore Christians are the experts on homosexuality, even though they are. They haven't done anything to study it. They haven't done anything for relationships with actual homosexuals. And so, yeah, this is what I'm dealing with, right? Where they just think they know better. But then when they're in situations where they don't want to actually evaluate those beliefs and why those are true, or who justified those to begin with, right? And it's like, why didn't you actually talk to a gay person to actually learn about the perspective and things? And the situation gets muddled quickly because one of my Christian pharmacist friends, his brother is gay, and he continually prays for him to repent and of his lifestyle. And it's like, well, you know, I I have no skin in this game. If this is what you want me to pray for, hey, you're my friend, okay. But this is what I'm dealing with, right? Where it's like this is the story people are telling us about homosexuality, right? And so instead of maybe having more empathy and actually exploring and actually maybe getting to a point, it's like, hey, you know what? All these are actually unwarranted and actually have a reasonable platonic relationship with someone who doesn't think like me or look like me or talk like me. It is, oh, I'd rather hang on to these fears because if I don't want to admit that if I might be wrong, that I might feel incompetent, right? I don't want to admit that I am a bigot or a prejudiced person or things like that. Even though I'm happy to admit, I know I have my share of prejudices, right? Like when my mom tells me growing up, she's like, Jerry, don't date a black girl. Like, it's just not worth the headache. And it's just like, okay, thanks, mom. One of my best friends from high school who's white. And, he's a strong Christian, he was like consistent with those beliefs. And he tells me, he goes, yeah, I grew up in a Christian home. I don't doubt, my parents are Christian, but she would disown me if I took a black girl to prom. So things like this.
Well, shit. The Felicias of the world and the Shaniquas and all of them have not done black girls any favors by the way they've acted. However, there's no reason to clump them all together and act like every black girl in the world is gonna be a handful. She will be strong, she will be outspoken, but if that and that turns a lot of men on. You know,
It
not every
does.
man finds a problem with that. And so
True.
so
True.
so if you can't handle a black girl, then just don't fuck with her. But that doesn't something wrong with her because she's bold. I'm not talking about the rude bitch hanging out at the gas station and all of that. Because I say that because I had this happen to me. I was just checking out gas or whatever, and this black girl walks up to me. She just reaches for whatever she could find, a pack of gum. Here, buy me this. I don't know her. I try
Yeah.
I try to talk to a black girl. No, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I tried to talk to a black girl at this club in San Antonio when I was in the military, and I was like, "Hey, how you doing? What's up, man?" She grabbed my hand. She go, "What's your name? Do you have a job? You have this, you have that. How much you make? Do you have a house? Do you have a car?" That was the first words out of her mouth. She's like, "Okay, good. Talk to me." Okay, so now I don't know what happened to her to put her on guard like that, but that's the that's the experience
Wow.
I had.
Yeah.
So
Amazing.
So my hats go off to your gay pharmacist friend for opening the library and reading your class for filth. Because fundamentalists, be they fundamentalists who sit on the Supreme Court of our United States or anywhere, are closed-minded, rigid, rules-bearing people. But the Lord said that people were not made for rules and that rules were made for people. And like evidence in the Bible, like when David was in the process of getting his kingdom and he goes through and he eats the bread from the priest that was
Yeah.
strictly forbidden. Jesus was like, you know what? I don't have a problem with that.
That's fair.
Exceptions can be made. It's not
Yeah.
all about the rules. Rules are general guidance, and God is willing to break his own rules at times. So who the fuck are we as people to be like, rules, 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 dims the rules. We can't break them. We can't shake them, or there will be hell to pay. That's not God speaking. That's people speaking.
That's control speaking. You're right.
It's all kinds of things speaking, hate, insecurity, and stuff like that. But I can't do anything about bullshit as people like that. What I can do is educate people so that they can see this and then make a decision. They can see the bullshit in other people, then make a decision to run away because that's all you can do. There is no arguing. I don't argue with Trump supporters. I don't argue with anti-vaxxers. I
Good.
don't argue with people who think January 6th wasn't an insurrection. I just go, okay, that's what you think. Bye.
Yep. Just disengage. This just doesn't help. It's all.
Bye. And
Yeah.
bye, Felicia. Bye, Felicia. So, speaking of crazy bitches, were there any Karens in this organization, in your congregation that you ever had to deal with?
Oh, there's no shortage of them. I mean, like, there's one. We'll call her Katie. So Katie, it's like it's kind of like they've just resolved to be unhappy with everything. Like she continually complained about our class. She's like, the guys are too passive. They're not asking any of us out. And we're just like, but then you shoot them down when they do. And they're like, well, they should still ask us out. And, just people are showing up to the events and all those other things. We didn't have a good enough turnout here. And it's like, just this self-fulfilling prophecy. And then later when the class folded, she's like, I was right. Like, I was right. Like, it wasn't going to hold. And it's like, so what if you were right? Like, I mean, you spoke it into existence. And plus people don't want to stick around in a class where like people are complaining all the time. It's like, yeah, of course. And that's the negative energy surrounding that. And I'll admit, I was a pessimist and that scared people away, right? When I'm like, yeah, this class probably won't last more than a year after a while. And they're like, oh, well, if that's the case, why would I stick around? And it's like, oops,
Right.
why shouldn't have said that, right? So yeah, things like that. But yeah, between all the random curveballs and then it's a volunteer organization, right? People can leave whenever they want. They don't even need to give you 2 weeks notice if they're not going to, leave the class. If they're going to leave the class, they don't need to tell you anything. And given just how conflict averse so many people were in the class, a bunch of them just started an exodus without me knowing. And the next thing you know, it's like, wow, why is that class down to like 15 people? It's like, So yeah, lots of fun stuff on top of dealing with more predators. So to make sure your audience gets their money's worth, I'll share another fun story of singles ministry shenanigans. So in a different class, not mine, but this is still worth listening to. At one point, the teacher of this class is, he's going through his lesson. And in the middle, at about his 2 o'clock, he sees a guy like come up to a girl sitting at the table and like lay a dozen roses like in front of her, like on the table in front of her. And he's just doing his best just to maintain composure and just finish the lesson. Because as soon as this guy put the roses down, all the male leadership started talking in the class, all the women leadership in the class started talking. And as soon as the class concluded, like all the guys pretty much formed like a wall around this guy and they kind of square out the class, all the girls, form their own like protective circle around the women to escort around. And this is the kind of thing that we're dealing with, right? Just you have you have aversion to rejection, or you have people that have the courage but don't know how to express it in a healthy way in terms of trying to get a girl's attention. And then you have everything else in between that, they just scrutinize like clumsy things like this. Just like, oh, no, no. If it's awkward or if it's creepy, okay, either way, we're just going to have to flush it. So things like this.
You see, that same mentality. The church don't know how to mind their own damn business is
Mhm.
why, we have like the anti-abortion laws and shit that y'all have there in Texas now. It's that
Mm.
same foundation of thinking. Like we, the church, must get involved in every detail of someone's life because we clearly know better than they do. Now, on that day, they could have just chosen to do nothing and let
Mhm.
the events play out. You know, but then again, if they don't want the staff people drinking when they're not around, then shit. I mean, certainly anything done in front of them must be dealt with. I mean, this is a George Orwell situation. Brick Brother's not only watching you, bitch, he's
Mhm.
just there all the time, everywhere you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
I mean, did they let the staff members masturbate?
I don't know.
There are no rules
I,
against jacking off and all of that.
I, I don't know what those rules are. So I'm not going to pretend to know. On that note, I will say this much though, because this is one I can expound on. Well, it's just there was a point when an older guy I met in the church like offered to mentor me, and I was at a point in my life where I was just open to the instruction because I was between jobs, and he kept talking, and I'm just like, okay, roll the dice. Let's see what this guy has to say. And at one point, yeah, that's exactly what you said. It was like he would tell me, he goes, you know, drinking is bad. Don't do it. Like that's bad. But then he would tell me, he would actually encourage me to masturbate because he's like, you're single and God designed you this way. And if you don't have a wife, then you still need, you still got to, unload your gun or whatever. And I'm just kind of like, what? And he's like, look, man, my wife had a hysterectomy and she's hardly ever in the mood. And so, you don't want to sit in outside of that. So this is like, from like damage control. And then, just to top it all off, he's like, Jerry, lube makes all the difference. And I'm like, okay, I need to hang up the phone. I needed to hang up the phone. Okay.
He's talking to you like a teenager just starting out life. But
Pretty much, yeah. Like it was just like I was 30, like it was in my 30s when he offered to mentor me, and it's like, why are you talking to me like I don't know any better? It's like, and then you wonder why I just don't want to hang around you anymore or learn from you anymore. Like his big chip on his shoulder was telling me that evolution is a theory from the devil. And I had to embrace like young earth creationism because that was the correct interpretation of how this world came to be.
Oh my God, there's so much happening there. I appreciate his how comfortable he was to talk about everything.
Mhm,
However, I think he went too far because he sounds kind of like a conspiracy theorist kind of person.
mhm,
You see, church is not supposed to be stressful. You're supposed to be able to go to church,
mhm,
have a positive communal experience, worshiping whatever God you believe in, volunteer and help out if you will, help the
mhm,
poor, do whatever, then go the fuck home.
mhm,
Worried about who's fucking who, who's jacking off and who's not, who's drinking and who's not. That's when you're
mhm,
going too far. You're becoming extra.
mhm,
And, this is the thing that has turned people off from churches,
mhm. Yeah.
and why people don't care to go anymore. And so did this have any sort of impact in these negative things that you saw
Mhm.
at church have any sort of impact on your own personal spiritual walk?
Of course, as a kid who was insecure, I just wanted a place to belong, right? I mean, that's kind of what led me to the church to begin with. I had a set of friends, and in high school, I thought they would be friends for life. And then, after falling out, I'm just like, and I'll admit, high school problems are so small, but, in my world, friends were everything. Approval was everything. And so when Karen, reached out to me to invite me to church camp, and, church camp is high school church camp is just like, yeah, it's just peer pressure, basically, right? It's like all these cute girls crying, asking you to come to know Jesus, and you're just like, well, God, like if that means all these girls will like me for becoming a Christian. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I knew enough in my life for it to say, hey, you know what, I'm not in control like I thought I was, and Jesus is the one who can offer the forgiveness, love, and forgotten and guidance that I thought that I needed. And so, yeah, when you see this approval addiction transfer into the church where they're like, okay, well, if you're really a Christian, you have to jump through hoops A, B, and C. Then, go on a mission trip. You got to lead a small group. You got to, tithe, don't just tithe 10, tithe 15%, right? And it's just this continuous cycle of wanting. And it wasn't until I went to Beirut, 6 years ago, when I got to see a form of Christianity that really actually kind of reset my perspective and really inspired me to go down a different path because, hanging out with Arabic Christian doctors, sponsoring in clinics in areas like Damascus and Mosul and South Sudan. And, they believe, hey, yeah, we're, we're not here to say Islam is wrong. We are here to just show them how, the love of Jesus Christ can literally heal them. And, I'm just like, I see their patience and I see the persistence and I see the gentleness. And I said, you know what? I like the way these people interpret the Bible and how they carry themselves. Is it perfect? No. Like there's so many things, when you're dealing with people, there's politics and there's all sorts of fighting, things like that. But they have a unity and a commitment to each other that I didn't find, in the consumeristic capitalist church we see here. Right. So yeah, I mean, I'm scarred from burnout volunteerism. And, I'm being very, very cautious now as to when someone says, you have skills. We need them to help our platform. It's like, okay, well, hang on. Is this is this really aligned with my biggest priorities? And to be able to say no, and for them to really, if they give me more flack, then it's all the more reason to say no. But if they say, hey, we understand, it's like, okay, you know what? If we can say no to each other in the church and not have fallout, then yeah, maybe there's some chance for growth there.
See, what you got is a different perspective. You got a
Hmm.
new perspective. And when you compare it to two, you felt more love and simplicity, people in the other country. See, Jesus simply said that if I be lifted up, I would draw all men unto me. In terms of soul winning and stuff like that, and getting people to convert, humans don't have the power to convert anybody. Only God can
True.
save people. And the only
True.
thing Jesus said was to talk about him. Like when Jesus was here, he said that he only gave praises to his Father.
Mhm.
You know, Jesus commands of us to just praise him.
Mhm.
He will do the actual drawing. So there is nowhere in nobody's Bible, well, shit, unless somebody came up with some bullshit, that commands us to pray for the faults of other people. Because
Good.
I can't imagine going before the Lord and being like, Jesus, I'm good. I'm good to go. But can you fix that bitch over there? Because they are fucked up.
Mhm.
That don't work that way because
Well, that's exactly what the story, with the tax collector and the other guy, right? He's just like, "Thank you that you didn't make me like this person. Like, thank you for making me awesome. You guys just like God have mercy on me. I'm a sinner." And it's like, yeah, I like that prayer. I like that prayer better than that one, right?
the Lord said, he warned people about hypocrisy. And there's a tendency in people to hone in on the faults or the perceived faults of somebody else. And the Lord warns us about this. And yet so many people fall into this rabbit hole. He said, you cannot pray for, for a trickle in your eye, a trickle of fault in somebody else when you have basically a whole waterfall of fault in your own because you can't see clearly
Mhm.
going on in yourself. The Lord is calling us to focus on ourselves,
Good.
not other people.
Mhm.
And the arrogance of thinking that you can read through the Bible and find out what's wrong with somebody else is baffling and is not the point. The point of the Bible is that you can read through it and find out what's wrong with you and
Good.
what you can fix and how you can help the world, not what's fucked
Good.
up with other people and how you can dominate other people.
Mhm.
But again, we can't fix bitches like that. But we can talk about this shit so that people don't let people boss them around and work them over and calling themselves doing it in the name of the Lord. No, ma'am, not today, Satan. You mentioned before how you saw men trying to use scripture to coerce their wives into having sex.
Mhm.
Talk to me about how you saw men in this church twisting scripture to their advantage sexually.
Well, I mean, yeah, we can look at the passage in Ephesians, right? And they're just like, wives, you're supposed to submit to your husbands. Like, I have the title, and you need to respect the title, right? So give me what I want when I want it, because that's what you signed up for when you married me, right? Yeah, it's the kind of back to the passage that in First Corinthians, that my former quote mentor cited to me. It's just like, look, they said everything is permissible to me. God made us a certain way. You know, God made the stomach. Food is for the stomach, and the stomach is for food. Things like this, right? And yeah, I mean, at one point, the Bible people would use biblical passages to justify slavery, right? And it's like, how is that okay, right? All sorts of injustices. And, ideally, we'd like to think that Christians would be, repentant and self correcting in a way. But we also have plenty of people who insist that, no, like what was true then is true now. And okay, no, we still need to have that keep going. And so, yeah, I mean, basically, right, anytime there's any level of coercion, that's no longer love, right? Like we talk about marriage being the most sacrificial relationship you're supposed to be. So if, you want her to do something and she's not comfortable doing it, for you to twist her arm and say, well, you don't really love me, then it's like, no, that's not loving. That's not sacrificial. Right. But it happens all the time.
All kinds of coercion happens all the time. And again, the encouragement here is for people to come to know God for themselves, to read through the Bible in its original languages, which shit, you don't even have to buy the thick concordances like I have now. You can just Google, what does this passage say in its original text and then kind of interpret it from there. Y'all, we just cannot trust preachers and pastors to tell us the truth. I ain't saying they all lie, but I'm saying like your eternal life and your happiness on this earth should not lie upon the words of somebody else when you have this knowledge at your fingertips. So let us be mindful of why we're going to church, what we're really getting out of it. If the shit is real, was there ever a point that you felt like your time in there during this church that you stepped back and looked at it and thought this isn't real, or this is fake, or this is bullshit, or anything?
I'll be happy to. The moment where I had to kind of really like struggle to process what was going on was actually in 2016 during the political race, right? After I say this, people will know exactly which church I'm going to. But at one point they were doing like, real people, real, real Christians, like interviews. And it was just like celebrities. Like at one point they interviewed Andy Pep, right? And, man was like, oh, well, yeah, these great. When I was wondering, like I had to ask myself, where was I? They're like, all right, next up, we're going to talk to Ted Cruz. And people just stood like standing. Oh, and I'm just like, where am I? Like, what's going on? I thought I was in church, you know? So
Mm.
yeah, that was the moment where I said, you know what, maybe I need something else.
Well, shit. All you had to do was mention Cancun cruise, and
Yeah.
Yep.
Cancun cruise. Yeah, that should be a bumper sticker. People need to make that.
Okay. Well, let's
Yeah.
shift gears from the time you spent in hell, and 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 talk. Because I wanted to talk about, because in the last interview you mentioned something about xenophobia being like a thing in
Mhm,
Houston. Now, when I lived in Houston,
mhm,
I think I only rode through Chinatown like a couple of times and things
mhm.
like that. Tell me what bad thing do you see happening to the Asian community there?
I mean, it's on mainly on the political activist side that, you start to see these things. And you know what? It's tough when a conflict averse, race doesn't want to deal with these things because they're like, well, we don't like these injustices, but we're not sure what we can do to stand up to them. So some of the things that OCA has mentioned, right? One is like higher scrutiny levels for verification of IDs at like voting booths, right? They're just like, are you really a citizen? And it's like, yeah, here's my paperwork. Well, I don't know. And so like they stall the process, right? Because they've already taken a stance of doubt, even though like there's more than enough evidence to show that this person's legit citizen, right? Houston's Chinatown itself is built on discrimination, right? They at one point all the city officials sequestered all the Asians to the southwest part of the city, and then they draw up the voting district in such a way that the Asians don't even have their own vote. Like they deliberately split up the region that they were living in, so they couldn't have any political leverage. So yeah, like Houston's built, with these things in place because there's this, fear of yellow peril or whatever else they say. Well, we're in control and we don't want other people to have a chance at, taking away our kingdom. So let's make sure that we leverage the correct things. And I mean, it's on several levels. And one of the stories that I haven't shared as much, but I think this is especially funny. At one point, I was babysitting at a pharmacy my company had acquired in like a ghetto part of Houston. It's like Beechnut and Willcrest, not a great area town, right? And so the previous owner had barely kept the lights on and the bills paid by moving like cash scripts, like shady scripts from clinics that were not looking for legitimate medical needs to issue prescriptions. Like they were just moving, they were issuing like hydrocodone, Soma, Xanax, the Trinity as it said on the street just to make money. And so this black guy randomly comes in and asks me for purple drink. He's like, yo, man, you got a promise with codeine? And I honestly didn't. Like he only had the hydrocodone, Soma, and Xanax, but no cough syrup. And I'm like, sorry, man, nope. He's like, all right. And then right as he's about to walk out the door, he goes, ah. Like, all right, that was crass, but I don't want to get stabbed. So I'm just going to let that go. But, like, how are we supposed to fight a bigger battle when we're like all the minorities are still like, dealing with each other's prejudices? So, yeah.
Especially in a city like Houston, you're right there by the border of Mexico. You
Mhm.
have all the black people, browns people, all the nice hues of
Mhm.
everything that's not white. You
Yeah.
know, nothing against white, white people are great,
Yeah.
fuck Republicans, don't give a shit, fuck Republicans. And and so, but you have such a lot of places like to say they're a melting pot and so diverse and blah, 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 like everywhere says that. But Houston's a different son of a bitch. Like you got a lot of shit going on in Houston
Mhm.
in terms of the options there. When I was a recruiter in Southern California, one of my an Air Force recruiter in Southern California, one of the high schools that I recruited from, they had like
Mhm.
racial wars against the black people and the Mexican people.
Oh, wow.
Why can't y'all get together and fuck up the white people? If
Mhm.
any kind of fight has to happen, why are
Mhm.
you letting like the white people sit there and watch the
Mhm.
two races that they don't like anyway fuck each other
Yeah,
up, and they're sitting there
exactly.
told you about them black people and the Mexican people.
Yeah, right. They're like, why are we don't have to kick them out. We're letting them destroy each other. Yeah, exactly it.
In my lifetime, black people have been the people who have given me the hardest time, honestly, the most
Mhm.
grief. It's actually been white people who have been my champions.
Wow.
You never know where you're gonna find allies and friends. I've been, black people tend to get a lot of very envious of me because I don't talk like I'm from the hood, even though
Mhm.
I am from the hood. I've
Yeah.
never carried myself like I'm from the hood.
Mhm.
I've always carried myself like fucking Princess Diana or some shit, and they just couldn't deal with it. And that's
Mhm.
where that comes from. But that relates to people who are successful and powerful. And so doors have opened for me because of my demeanor.
Mm.
Because I know how to talk to people and respect people and not judge them and jump to conclusions before I meet them. Talk to me about, you mentioned the gerrymandering of voting districts.
Mhm.
Tell me about what issues the Asians are having access to voting.
Well, it's just more of like it's just like all these deterrents in place, right? We want to have a seat at the table, right? Like in terms of like management jobs and, upper level CEO jobs and things like that. And so in terms of legislature, right? Yeah, maybe the taxes are higher. I have to do some more research on this, but maybe the taxes are higher in certain areas, right? That's why people tease about all the Asians going to Bel Air High School because it's like the most affordable public high school and most reputable of all the public high schools there, right? And so yeah, there's this notion of yeah, what kind of reputation do they have, right? They're like, okay, the Asians only live in like sugar lands or safe part of town, right? And yeah, it's just more about yeah. I'm just trying to think of an example of where there was like blatant evidence that yeah, they're just trying to crowd out Asians. Thankfully, in Houston, because it's a multicultural city, you don't see that as much. But like New York was multicultural, but all the hate crimes happen there. Atlanta has a good chunk of Asians as well, and that's where the hate crimes happen. So yeah, I mean, I'd have to, ask my friends at OCA to see, hey, what exactly are you seeing in Houston? That's really still a problem. But the ongoing things are still there. As long as we have a preconception that we're just like this model minority that's just going to do our part to get along and not ruffle feathers when we're being slandered or worse, then, and it's just going to be an uphill battle all the time.
It sucks that y'all living in a red state. Your gimpy ass governor, and nothing against handicapped people, but he deserves the insult. I would never ever refer to somebody in a wheelchair that way other than than Governor Greg Abbott. He's the
Hmm.
only person I would ever be like, that gimpy bitch. Other than that, I'd be like, I just talk to handicapped people like regular folks, so they don't need to be reduced or diminished. They're capable and
Yeah.
they have strong bodies otherwise, other than what part of them is handicapped. But that stupid son of a bitch,
Hmm.
deserves all the insults bestowed upon him.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah.
since the coronavirus has started, we've seen xenophobia in this country in particular, in other countries
Hmm.
too, but in this country in particular, rise.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
It is, this still just speaks back to like the fears people have in church. They don't know where the fuck it's coming from. Who just gay
Hmm.
people are bad. Every gay man wants to fuck
Hmm.
a child. The Asian
Hmm.
people are just bad. They created the coronavirus, and all the
Hmm.
Mexican people want to come here and take our jobs, and all the immigrants.
Hmm.
You know, I'm just gonna let you have our closing thoughts and words here. I want you to speak to us about the general xenophobia since the coronavirus has started, and just I don't even know. Like, this sort of thing is like so like upsetting to me. The amount of
Hmm.
energy and force people put behind destruction.
Hmm.
Even if we would take that same amount of energy and put it towards building each other up, we would be so much
Yeah.
further along.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just talk, Jerry. I need to shut up.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. No, that's from the from what I've observed when Corona started to first get big, it was unfortunate that leadership set a really bad example, right? I remember the clip that did it for me was when I happened to watch a clip of Donald Trump talking about the China virus, and then the reporter asked him, why do you keep calling it the China virus? And he goes, because it's from China. And I'm like, oh no, I don't need another 4 years of this guy. Like, I don't, you know. And so, when leadership is setting tone, right? And people will justify bad behavior because they're like, well, if he can do it, then I get to do that too, right? And people are like, yeah, Trump is awesome, da da da. And it's like, but for whom, right? All of a sudden, if you're an immigrant, you're scared, right? A lot of hate crimes were inspired by the fact that Trump kept saying to send them back, right? Whether it's Mexican senators that were actually born here, that are actually citizens, they're like, send them back. It's like, wow, that took me, that was the flashback to my fourth grade, playground tiff with this girl who's like, get back to Japan where you belong. And it's like, brag, like, why do I need to go back to Japan? Like, I'm Taiwanese. I was born here. I'm a citizen. I don't know why I need to go back to Japan. But, not the first time an Asian has dealt with, slander. So I'm not here to make myself a diva or narcissistic or anything. But this is, what do you do with that, right? And so between the coronavirus being handled poorly because people are not, being locked down or sequestered or recognizing that they need to maybe put aside their needs and preferences for a greater good, right? If everyone would be able to say, hey, you know what, I could go out, but I'm going to stay in, right? Because it's just, I don't want to risk that. And what's funny is, so when my pharmacist friend who happens to be Republican would go back and forth on me with this. I was originally supposed to fly to, see family tomorrow. I was supposed to take a week off and, go to Tennessee and visit family and other things. They said, you know what, Omicron is spiking, let's just wait a couple months until things kind of quiet down. And I was sad to cancel my ticket, but I knew they were right. Like, I could have rolled the dice. My friend would tell me, he's like, well, look, Omicron's not fatal. Like you can still keep doing what you want to do. And it's like, but even if it's not, why would you want to overload? Hospitals are already overwhelmed with corona patients, right? Like I could have gone, believe me, I was sorely tempted. New Year's Eve, I knew there's a salsa dancing party on New Year's Eve. And I'm like, I cannot believe I'm going to pass this up because safety and also bigger fish to fry. Like, I needed time to reflect on the year. I needed to plan out this year so I could continue to build my business. So as much as anyone could have justified me going to go salsa dancing to celebrate, hey, Jerry, live a little. It's like, yes. And I'm going to turn that down so I can focus on bigger things and stay safe. And so I hope we get to that point where people say, hey, you know what? My decisions are mine. I can do what I want, technically, right? My choices are mine. My decisions are mine. And I'm going to choose that maybe I'm going to elevate society's needs above my own preferences. And yeah, like there are people here with the scarcity, and they have the scarcity mindset, right? They're just like, oh no, all these other people are going to take the jobs. And even though we came here for a better life, we don't want other people doing the same thing we do, right? As one person I read who put it, he goes, America is a country built by immigrants that has a very complicated relationship with immigrants. And I think but that's exactly it, right? So yeah, all that to say, right? How can we think, kind of the whole point of this Christianity thing, right? How can we put others' needs above our own so that we can all benefit and all maybe get to a point where things are civil and people can be safe and be seen, heard, and respected without fear of retribution or slander or undercutting or anything like that, right?
I'm not even saying nothing else because I didn't read enough Bitches for Filth on this interview. And what I'm going to do is close the doors to the library. Oh, but it will be reopened again, trust. But the way Jerry phrased all of that sums everything up nicely. I'm going to leave it at that. His website is adoptingleaders.com. And all of this is going to go in the show notes, all of his contact information, everything like that. And Jerry, I think you're a fantastic coach. I think you have fantastic, genuine insight coming from your lived experiences. And so I highly recommend you. Were those your closing words, or was there any last thing you wanted to say?
Thank you for your support today, man. Like, hey guys, I just want to shout out to him right now. He's one of the first people to buy my self-study conflict module. So I wanted to say thank you. Like, you're not just, supporting me through, hey, like, how, get some visibility. It's like, hey man, I really want to help you pay your bills and get this business off the ground. So grateful for your friendship and your support. So yeah, let's keep talking for sure.
Hell yeah, money talks, bullshit walks.
There you go.
All right, till next time.
Till next time.
Thank you all so much for taking time to listen to the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast. It really means everything to me. Look, if you love the show, you can find more information and resources at sexdrugsandjesus.com or wherever you listen to your podcast. Feel free to reach out to me directly at Devannon, sexdrugsandjesus.com, and on Twitter and Facebook as well. My name is Devannon, and it's been wonderful being your host today. And just remember that everything is going to be all right.